This episode is sponsored by Lendlord. Lendlord is an online platform designed to help landlords and property investors manage, track, and optimize their real estate investments. Lendlord has a whole suite of free services, including a deal analyzer, property flipping calculator, tenant CRM, profit and loss reports, and so much more. I personally use Lendlord to track all my rental properties. Think of it as a modern day upgrade to boring old spreadsheets. Lendlord also has useful tools to analyze real estate deals, allowing you to calculate cap rates, IRR, and annual cash flows. It's completely free, so check out the link in the description below and let me know what you think.
Hey, Steve Saretsky here. Welcome back to the show. I want to touch this week on what's happening in the Vancouver, Toronto housing market. I want to touch on some of the policy decisions that various levels of government have made and some of the results that we're seeing from those policies, as well as I want to touch briefly on the banking crisis, the Bank of Canada, the jobs market, how it's all playing into what we're seeing on the housing market right now. But I want to frame up this week's video with some comments from David Rosenberg. David Rosenberg is one of the most esteemed economists in this country. His reputation precedes him. He's been widely circulated in media for the past several decades. And so he recently wrote an op-ed of something which I've been talking about on this channel for a long time, as well as my colleagues in the Looney Hour have been writing about it. So it's interesting to see Rosenberg come out, again, a vocal guy. I think that's someone that takes very, very seriously. About the mismatch in supply demand between immigration or population growth, these targets the federal government is setting, and the ability to actually match those targets with the adequate level of housing supply to bring to market. Essentially, Rosenberg says we need to slow the rate of population growth, again, at least temporarily, as we're starting to see housing reaccelerate, and we are already in this housing crisis today. We're not able to actually build for the people that are coming into this country, let alone the people that are already here. And so Rosenberg basically goes on to say that the ratio of population to housing stock is already 40% above its longer term historical average. And so there's this huge mismatch between, again, the number of homes, the stock of homes, and the growth in your population. Again, remember, we added 1 million people to this country in 2022. And so, if I'm, keep in mind now, this kind of commentary, this sort of discussion that we're having here today, it would have been considered taboo, 2 or 3 years ago. You might have been, thrown out in the media. You might have been considered racist, xenophobic. You might have had all sorts of these names thrown at you for even contemplating the number of immigration in this country. And now it's interesting, we're starting to see all these op-eds. I mean, there was one in the Globe and Mail, I think, a week or two ago. So all of a sudden you have all these larger figureheads and large media conglomerates suddenly starting to say, maybe we need to reassess the policies that we're making around immigration and housing supply. But if I'm a government official here, you say, like, hey, listen, we need to set these targets for various reasons, in order to meet, pension obligations, in order to meet the shrinking labor force, etc. Well, then you say, we better start ramping up on the supply side. And so what we're seeing on the supply side right now is housing starts are actually rolling over. They're not going up. They're actually rolling over right now, as one would expect when the cost of financing this construction of new housing doubles in less than 12 months as credit starts to tighten and as the outlook becomes less clear for investors that are putting their capital at risk to build new housing. They are naturally pulling back. And so if I'm a level of government, I would say, well, how do I incentivize new housing in what is going to be, or what we're in is basically a down or an uncertain market for developers. So how do I get them to basically continue to ramp up new housing starts? Well, one of the things is to look at input costs. So if your input cost is the cost of financing a project or the cost of building a project, if that's going up, well, maybe we can lower one of the input costs, which is taxation. In fact, taxation and fees are actually going up. They're going up at all the municipal levels. So development cost charges are going up. CMHC's rental financing program is seeing a 100% increase in their fee structure. And now there was a new report out from the Canadian, I believe it was the Canadian Centre for Economic Research, which showed that in the province of Ontario, approximately 30% of the cost of a new home is actually just taxes. 30%. So on $1 million home, you're looking at about $300,000. 300,000 of that $1 million is actually just taxation. And so this is the issue, is that real estate has become so structurally important to the Canadian economy. It's actually it has now become systemic in the tax base, the tax revenue base. Municipal governments, provincial governments, federal governments are addicted to it. It's like pigs at the trough. And so it's just becoming more and more burdensome to build new housing. The system is so broken, and I can tell you guys this like in depth as someone that has built projects, as someone that works with developers, as someone that is actively doing this on a day-to-day basis. The system is so broken, and it is a complicated mess to really fix. Again, if you look at housing starts right now, we're on pace this year for about 215,000 annual housing starts across the country. That's down from 270 plus thousand in 2021. It's well below recent projections from CMHC. So again, those forecasts and projections for where we are in housing starts are actually continuing to be revised lower every single quarter. And so one of the things, if you're the level of government, again, is like common policy measures suggest if you want less of something, think about foreign buyers, speculators in the housing market. What do? You bring in taxes, or you increase taxes to basically curb behavior. Right, that's what we've done for foreign buyers of that nature. We brought in a 20% foreign buyer tax in Vancouver and Toronto. And so, but if you want more of something, naturally what you typically would do is you would reduce taxes, you would incentivize new housing. But again, as I mentioned, 30% of the cost of a home in Ontario is taxation. You're taxing something that you desperately want and need. You're taxing as if it's cigarettes. So this is not a way to incentivize new construction. And so this is where I get really, really concerned, because what we're doing instead is we're bringing in these sort of demand side policies, these haphazard measures. You look at there was some good data out this week. There was a program that was brought in about 3 years ago called the First Time Home Buyer program. It was basically ramped up where it says, listen, if you're a first-time home buyer under $1 million, the federal government will lend up to 10% of your down payment. And it's basically an interest-free loan, and you don't have to worry about paying it. But once you sell it, we'll get our funds back, and we'll take our share of the profit, that 10%. And everyone was screaming that this was such an ineffective program. First of all, you're stimulating demand, number one. But number two is it wasn't really going to have any uptake in the expensive markets, because the numbers just didn't pencil. It was so expensive for people already in Vancouver and Toronto that if you couldn't scrape together, your own 10% down payment, you shouldn't be buying anyways. And so we've seen over the last 3 years, less in Vancouver, Toronto, Victoria, arguably your three most expensive markets in this country, and arguably where first-time homebuyers probably need the most help, less than 400 people over 3 years to use this program. And so this is considered, a government success. Is okay, we bring out this program. We tell the masses that we're helping first-time home buyers. We're going to help you. The market's not fair, and they bring in these measures that just are not working, and they're not helping the market. And this leads me to the situation that we're in today. Is despite all of the macro headwinds, foreign buyer taxes, speculation taxes, empty homes taxes, a 400 basis point increase in interest rates in 12 months, we've got the housing market once again accelerating to the upside. Prices in basically every Canadian market right now are moving higher. And this is not a 1 month trend. This has been going on for 4 months now in Vancouver and Toronto specifically. Calgary home prices just hit a new all-time high. If you look at the number of listings for sale currently in Greater Vancouver here, this is standing inventory. aka how many homes are currently listed on the MLS as of the end of April of 2023. It is an all-time low with data going back to 2005. This is as far back as our data goes. But you've got standing inventory right now at the lowest levels since 2005. Now, consider the fact that obviously your population has grown over those years, etc. We've obviously added to housing stock. We've got not only that, but you've got outside of the pandemic, which was when the world shut down in April of 2020. It was another 20 plus year low in new listings, not only in Vancouver, but in the GTA. We can see in the GTA, look at this chart here on single family houses for sale on the market, new listings coming to market in the GTA. Again, that looks absolutely horrendous. And so we are in this supply demand imbalance, despite all of the macro headwinds that are playing out. We're talking about banking crisis. We're talking about the threat of an imminent recession. Again, which I think hasn't really played out, but regardless, structurally, fundamentally, we still have, I believe, a real issue with a demand supply imbalance, and it seems highly unlikely that it's going to get resolved anytime soon because it is a complicated mess. I'll add one more point to that. In the province of Ontario, remember what I just told you? I told you that 30% of the cost of a new home is taxation. In the province of Ontario, which services over 14 million people, you have four employees which are directly responsible for approving rezoning from commercial use to residential use. So if you have an industrial space, if you have a commercial office space that you want to convert and go through a rezoning to build residential housing, there are 4 employees that are responsible in the province to approve these applications. And this is why it takes 3 years on average to get a rezoning in the province of Ontario. And BC, I can tell you, is not a whole lot different. But that is a mind-blowing stat. It's something that is fundamentally completely broken in this country. And so my hope is that this dialogue here today will enhance this conversation. I know that we've got policymakers that watch this channel. We've got people at the banks and developers and whatnot. So hopefully this can help enhance that conversation. But this is what's happening. This is why we're seeing, again, a re-acceleration in home prices across this country, which I think is very concerning. I think that if I was the Bank of Canada trying to squash inflation, the last thing I'd want to see is home prices accelerating back up to the high side, housing becoming incredibly more unaffordable. Yes, home prices dropped off. They're now really accelerating to the upside, but mortgage rates are still in the 5s. So at the end of the day, despite all these measures, despite all this government rhetoric over the last 5-6 years trying to squash demand and bring out all these little tiny policies around the edges, housing every single year basically has become less and less and less affordable. And I think it's really time to start asking some difficult questions, not only around the immigration side, but again, how do we really influence the housing supply side? So anyways, hope that helps for some dialogue. Would love to hear your comments below. As always, we'll see you next week.